SARS executive Johan van Logrenberg is expected to testify. Lindsay Dentlinger is in Parliament and joins us now. Good morning, Lindsay. Another interesting day too yesterday, even load shedding. But I know particularly with Advocate Dalimpofu, he went on to now explain how Busisiwe Mkhwebane has been prejudiced by the decision to suspend, that here she's been locked out of her emails. Just elaborate on just that statement from the Advocate.
Good morning, Fundo. Well, that was something we heard on Monday already, Dalimpofu putting it on the table right at the onset to bolster his argument that her suspension has been premature and illegal. The suspension by the President, I should point out, and not by this committee, which doesn't have the powers to suspend her, but really saying what the impact of this was having was that she was locked out of her emails and unable to prepare for these hearings because she had been locked out. Again, late yesterday, as these proceedings were drawing to a close after 8 o'clock last night, again putting on the table before this committee that while he had previously said that she had had access to her emails from late Thursday, that again yesterday he said her emails had been blocked and it had the effect of her not being able to receive the documents from her legal team, from Parliament, in terms of preparing for these hearings. So really a central tenet of what's been running through over the last 2 days about this unlawful suspension. Dalimpofu lashing out yesterday again at a constitutional law expert about when in the process it would be more appropriate to suspend the Public Protector's Office. Dalimpofu of the belief that this should only happen if a finding was made of wrongdoing by this committee and that the President had acted prematurely, and he was backed up by EFF leader Julius Malema from the virtual platform late yesterday, saying that they were only participating in these proceedings so that when later it was perhaps went on review, that they couldn't say they didn't use the opportunity to be part of this meeting. So Dalimpofu repeatedly telling this committee that he and the Public Protector, they were here under protest. But here's some of those remarks he made towards the end of the session last night.
Our attitude generally of Advocate Mkhwebane is that we're here to participate, and we'll do so under the protest of all the issues we listed, including this one, which we listed yesterday, that the scope of the, that it would be illegal, going back to Honorable Heron's question, to have the wider scope as opposed to the one that was sifted by the independent panel. What we do about that is our business. When we do it is our business. But it's just so that you know that nobody says later we did not raise. So obviously we have no power to stop you from adopting the document, but we will just record our strong objection in that, and it's on that objection is based on Rule 129 AD2, which says the committee must ensure that the inquiry is conducted in a reasonable and procedurally fair manner within a reasonable time frame. In our view, that is not, rather this document does not accord with that duty of this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Now, Lindsay, beyond this, it was very tense between the chairperson and Dalimpofu. Just talk to us about this relationship that's starting to form there. We see a lot of back and forth between the two.
Yes, Mfundo, just to make reference to the latter part of what you just heard Dalimpofu speak about a document, and that document is what's called the directives. And essentially, this committee is guided by a set of rules, a set of directives, as they call it here, which will really guide the process of this committee. And that document was adopted late last night. That is what Dalimpofu says they don't agree with. It outlines things, for example, as to how witnesses are called, the process that will be followed. Essentially, essentially the rules and procedures of this committee, and it was important for the committee to adopt that late last night. They were due to do it early on day one already, because this morning's testimony will begin really with the real evidence witnesses. Johan van Lochenberg, a former SARS official, yesterday was a expert witness, and so it was important to have that document done. And that's really the exchange that you speak of with chairperson of this committee, Richard Jantyi, because repeatedly Dali Mpofu also throwing back at the House that he believed that the MPs who are sitting on this committee are biased. And by the end of the day, the MPs had also appealed to the chairperson to rule Dali Mpofu out of order, saying he had to be specific exactly who of them were biased, and he had to clarify remarks that he claimed that these MPs had made, who he said were popping champagne when she was suspended, and who cheered on and has always been against her. He said even before she was appointed as Public Protector, they wanted her gone. And Richard Jantyi, the chairperson of this committee, saying he wouldn't tolerate the continuous barbs being thrown at MPs, and that Dali Mpofu had to single out exactly who we were speaking about, because he didn't believe, the chairperson that is, that this committee was holding its proceedings in an illegal fashion. But here's Richard Jantyi responding to Dali Mpofu on that.
This issue of bias or perception of bias would have been raised in our last meeting. I want to remind you, by one of our members. And I would have given a ruling on the matter and summarized the issue in saying, up until that point and today, there is no bias about this committee, and there's no member in this committee, in the proceedings of this committee, and who is a member of this committee. Maybe it's something that will pick up, that as a chairperson I must be worried about, that she or he will contaminate this process. And I would have clarified that we are here as members, but we come from political parties. And that these political parties, correctly so, in their own right, they have developed certain positions.
All right, and then today, Lindsay, we're expecting Johan van Lochenberg to testify. Just take us through or give us context. We all remember Johan from SARS, and this pertained to the rogue unit. Just give us context.
So the context to that, Mfundo, is that essentially this committee is testing the Public Protector's fitness to hold office based on 4 reports that she had issues, one of them being the one you referred to on that so-called rogue unit within SARS that we know both the North Gauteng High Court dismissed and the Public Protector lost on appeal in the Supreme Court of Appeal. And so this committee really has to stick to taking their decisions and probing the Public Protector based on 4 reports, the others being the Frieda Dairy report, the CR17, and those were the reports that were contained in that motion that was tabled by the DA originally, and on which it based its claims, and which an independent panel chaired by former Justice Beson Kambinde found that there was prima facie evidence to hold this inquiry in the first place. And you would recall what Dali Mpofu was saying in that earlier sound clip about staying within the scope of this investigation, meaning that the committee cannot stray beyond matters contained in that original motion, and in which those 4 reports are particularly cited to hold this inquiry. And Johan van Lochenberg then becomes the first witness then to give testimony in relation to that report, of which he was such a central figure.
All right, Lindsay, we'll leave it there for now and catch up with you a bit later. That is reporter Lindsay Dentlinger for us. More news and updates.